Legends of New York Crime. The streets of New York City burned with secrets. And on a rain-soaked night in 1978, those secrets were about to explode. The neon glow of Times Square flickered through the downpour, casting jagged reflections on the pavement as Tommy "Knuckles" Russo sprinted down 42nd Street, his trench coat flapping like a broken wing. Behind him, the wail of sirens sliced through the storm, and the unmistakable growl of a black Cadillac roared closer. Tommy's heart pounded, not from the run, but from the weight of what he'd just seen. In his pocket, a blood-stained ledger held the names of every major player in the city's underworld. And tonight, that book was worth more than his life. The rain pelted Tommy's face as he ducked into an alley, his shoes slipping on the slick cobblestones. He pressed himself against the grimy brick wall, clutching the ledger tighter. It wasn't just a book, it was a map of New York's criminal empire, a tangle of dirty cops, mob bosses, and politicians who'd sold their souls for a cut of the action. Tommy had been a low-level enforcer for the Gambino family, a nobody who broke knees and collected debts. But tonight, he'd stumbled onto something bigger than himself, something that could bring the whole city crashing down. He'd been at the Raven's Den, a smoky dive bar in Hell's Kitchen, when he overheard a conversation he wasn't meant to hear. Don Vito Castellano, the Gambino patriarch, was meeting with a man in a tailored suit who reeked of government. They spoke in hushed tones about the ledger, a record of every bribe, hit, and deal that kept New York's underworld spinning. Tommy, nursing a whiskey at the bar, had crept closer, his curiosity outweighing his fear. When the man in the suit left, he forgot his briefcase. Tommy didn't think twice, he grabbed it and ran. Now, as the Cadillac's headlights swept the alley, Tommy knew he'd made a mistake. The Gambinos didn't forgive, and they didn't forget. He could hear the crunch of boots on broken glass, the low murmur of voices. "Find him," someone barked. "He's got the book." Tommy's breath hitched. He slipped deeper into the alley, his mind racing. He couldn't go to the cops, half of them were in the ledger's pages. He couldn't go home, they'd be waiting. His only chance was to get the ledger to someone outside the city, someone clean. But who? The only name that came to mind was Maria Delgado, a journalist who'd been sniffing around the Gambinos for years. She was fearless, or maybe just crazy, but if anyone could use the ledger to burn the mob to the ground, it was her. The story of New York's criminal underworld wasn't born in 1978, it had been festering for decades. The city was a chessboard, and every move was soaked in blood. The five families, Gambino, Lucchese, Genovese, Bonanno, and Colombo, had carved up the boroughs like a Thanksgiving turkey. Construction rackets in Manhattan, drug trafficking in the Bronx, extortion in Brooklyn, their tentacles reached everywhere. But the real power wasn't in the guns or the money, it was in the secrets. The ledger Tommy carried was the key to it all, a Pandora's box of names, dates, and dollar amounts that could topple empires. Maria Delgado worked out of a cramped office in the Village, her desk buried under stacks of yellowed newspapers and cigarette butts. She was 34, with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, the kind of woman who could stare down a mobster and make him blink first. Maria had been chasing the story of the five families for years, ever since her brother, a beat cop, was gunned down in a botched raid in Harlem. The official report called it a gang hit, but Maria knew better. Her brother had been clean, and clean cops didn't last long in New York. When Tommy burst into her office at 2 a.m., soaked to the bone and clutching the ledger, Maria didn't flinch. "You look like hell," she said, lighting a cigarette. "What's in the book?" Tommy hesitated, glancing at the door like he expected it to explode. "Everything," he whispered. "Names, payoffs, hits, the whole damn city's in here." Maria's eyes gleamed. She took the ledger, flipping through pages scrawled with meticulous handwriting. Judges, senators, police commissioners, names she recognized, names she didn't. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, but with the thrill of a story that could change everything. "You know what this means, right?" she said. "You give me this, you're a dead man." Tommy laughed, a hollow sound. "I'm dead either way." The ledger's origins traced back to a man named Salvatore Sally Moretti, a bookkeeper for the Gambinos who'd been too smart for his own good. Sally had a knack for numbers, but more than that, he had a knack for survival. In the early 70s, he started keeping a private record of every transaction he handled for the family, not for blackmail, but for insurance. If the Gambinos ever turned on him, he wanted leverage. But Sally wasn't careful enough. A week before Tommy stole the ledger, Sally's body was found floating in the Hudson, his throat slit ear to ear. The ledger's existence was a rumor, a ghost story whispered in back rooms and barbershops. But now it was real, and it was in Maria's hands. She spent the next 48 hours locked in her office, poring over its pages, cross-referencing names with her own notes. The ledger wasn't just a list, it was a blueprint of corruption. It detailed how the Gambinos funneled money through construction companies, how they bribed cops to look the other way, how they rigged elections to keep their allies in power. Maria realized she wasn't just holding a story, she was holding a weapon. But weapons cut both ways. The Gambinos knew Tommy had the ledger, and they knew he'd run to Maria. By dawn, her office was being watched. A black sedan idled across the street, its tinted windows hiding cold eyes. Maria didn't care. She'd been threatened before, by mobsters, by cops, by her own editor, who told her she was chasing a death wish. But Maria wasn't built to back down. She called in a favor from an old friend, Detective Frank Malone, one of the few cops she trusted. Frank was a grizzled veteran with a limp from a bullet he took in '69. He'd been on the force long enough to know which cops were dirty, and he hated them more than Maria did. "Frank, I need you to get me out of the city," Maria said over a payphone, her voice low. "I've got something big." Frank didn't ask questions. "Meet me at the docks, Pier 17, midnight." The docks were a maze of rusted cranes and rotting wood, the air thick with the smell of salt and diesel. Maria arrived with the ledger tucked inside her coat, her heart pounding as she scanned the shadows. Frank was waiting, his old Chevy idling under a broken streetlight. But as Maria approached, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Another car, parked just out of sight. The Gambinos had found them. Before she could shout a warning, headlights flared, and the night erupted in gunfire. Frank dove behind a crate, pulling Maria with him. Bullets tore through the air, splintering wood and pinging off metal. Maria clutched the ledger, her mind racing. She wasn't a fighter, but she was a survivor. She scrambled toward the water, Frank covering her with his revolver. "Go," he shouted. "Get to the boat." The boat was a small skiff Frank had borrowed from a smuggler friend. Maria leapt aboard, her hands shaking as she started the engine. Frank wasn't so lucky. A bullet caught him in the shoulder, and he fell, blood pooling beneath him. Maria screamed his name, but there was no time. The Gambinos were closing in, their footsteps pounding on the dock. She gunned the engine, the skiff lurching into the dark waters of the East River. The ledger was still with her, but the cost was piling up. Frank was gone, Tommy was probably dead, and the city she loved was a snake pit. As Manhattan's skyline receded, Maria vowed to finish what she'd started. The ledger wasn't just a story anymore, it was a war. Maria spent the next week in hiding, moving between safe houses in Jersey and upstate New York. She worked feverishly, typing up her exposé on a borrowed typewriter, her fingers stained with ink and nicotine. The ledger's secrets poured out, names of judges who'd taken bribes, cops who'd planted evidence, politicians who'd sold out their constituents. She sent copies to every major newspaper, knowing most wouldn't touch it. The New York Times, the Post, the Daily News, they were all compromised, their editors too cozy with the city's power brokers. But Maria had one last card to play, an underground press in Brooklyn, run by a group of radicals who didn't care about consequences. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, a 10-page broadsheet titled The Ledger of Lies. It spread like wildfire, passed hand to hand in coffee shops and subway stations. By noon, the city was buzzing. Protests erupted outside City Hall, demanding investigations. The Gambinos went into lockdown, their lieutenants scrambling to contain the damage. But it was too late. The ledger's secrets were out, and the house of cards was collapsing. Maria knew she'd never be safe again. The Gambinos didn't forgive, and they had long memories. But as she watched the city burn from a safe house window, she felt a strange peace. She'd told the truth, and for one fleeting moment, New York listened. The legend of the ledger lived on, whispered in bars and backrooms long after the Gambinos faded. Some said Maria fled to Europe, others that she was still in the city, writing under a new name. The truth was, no one knew, but every now and then, a new story would break, a corrupt cop exposed, a politician indicted, and people would wonder, was Maria still out there, fighting the war she'd started? New York's underworld never died, but it never forgot the woman who dared to shine a light on its darkest corners. The ledger was gone, but its legacy was eternal, a reminder that even in a city built on secrets, the truth could still draw blood.